You hear everywhere online that people say you have to push every set to failure. Everything you do has to be to failure because failure is the way that you can actually build more muscle. But the truth is, that isn't the best way to actually build more muscle. And that's what I'll be speaking about in this video today. Why I don't push every single set to failure. And by doing that, I was able to build the most amount of muscle that I ever built in my fitness journey. I used to train to failure on almost every single set I did in the past. When I started exercising for the first few months, I saw online that everyone said push the set to failure. No pain, no gain. You have to push yourself every single set. If you don't, you're just wasting your time in the gym. So I followed that advice. And for the first few months, I made progress, yes, because I was a beginner in the gym. And since I'm a beginner, you make the most amount of progress in the beginning because you go from not training to actually training. And that simple process of starting to train actually builds the muscle. But what happens after you've been training for a while? That progress that you make, that exponential increase in the amount of muscle that you have made over this first few months of training starts to stall. You stop making that same amount of progress. At least that's what happened to me. And that's when I realized the detrimental effect of training to failure on every single set. The first way I noticed it is that I wasn't recovering as well anymore. I was always feeling tired, feeling sluggish, unable to focus on the day after I exercised or during the day, and my muscles didn't recover that fast. And that's because training to failure on every set actually strains your body more than you think. The first thing that happens is your central nervous system isn't as fresh anymore when you exercise and you burn out much faster. And secondly, your form isn't as good as it would be if you were actually controlling the weight and not pushing yourself to failure on every single set. And that's actually how my progress started to stall because I was pushing myself to failure on every single set. I wasn't able to control the weight as good anymore. I wasn't able to focus on slowly increasing the amount of weight that I was doing because I was only focused on going to failure. I wasn't actually thinking actively on how I can improve the quality of my exercise, the quality of my sets, the quality of my reps. I wasn't focused on that. The only things I was focused on was going to failure, pushing myself hard, and actually making sure that I'm sore after the gym. And that's the mindset that I want you to break today. And you will actually notice how your body and how your exercise and recovery will change once you stop pushing to failure on every set. The first thing that will happen is you will have more energy throughout your exercise routine. Since you have more energy, you can actually focus on stimulating your muscles even more. Just because you're pushing yourself to failure on every set doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually stimulating the muscle. If you're pushing yourself to failure and your form isn't correct, you're actually working the wrong muscle in the first place. And if you're pushing yourself to failure, there's more fatigue in place compared to stimulus. So if you focus on controlled reps and focus on quality reps, that's when you actually be able to stimulate your muscles more and correctly. And I want to introduce you to a term which you might be familiar with, but you don't know what it means. And that simple term is RPE, which stands for rate of perceived exertion. So basically, if your RPE is 10, your rate of perceived exertion means that you couldn't do another rep on that set. So if it's 10, you couldn't do another rep. If it's 9, you could do one more rep. If it was 8, you could do 2 more reps, and so on and so forth. That is what RPE is. Now, what I do is I make sure that on my first 2 sets of every single exercise that I do, my RPE is between 7 and 8. That ensures that I'm still stimulating my muscle enough while minimizing the amount of fatigue that I'm putting on my body. And on my last set, that's when I make sure that I push myself the hardest. That's when I go to failure. That means I couldn't do another rep on that set. That's when I implement failure. So failure isn't all wrong. You shouldn't just cut out failure altogether. You should just use it strategically and not implement it on every single set that you do because it will be counterproductive. So what I do is I go to failure on my last set. This allows me to still push myself hard, but when I go to the gym on my next session, I'm able to still recover faster. I'm not as sore anymore, and I'm still able to maintain the amount of energy throughout my workout sessions. So that's when failure can be useful. Not when you implement it throughout your whole exercise routine and then you completely drain after the gym. Then you're tired, you can't focus. Even when you get enough sleep, your muscles are still sore. You haven't recovered that fast anymore. That's why I'm saying that I don't go to failure on every single set anymore because I experienced those detrimental effects. And don't get me wrong, I actually thought that I was going easy on myself. And earlier this year, I actually pushed myself to failure on every single set again because I thought I was going easy. And then by doing that, I was reminded again of why I didn't go to failure anymore because I experienced those detrimental effects, that soreness, that lack of focus, not recovering as fast. I experienced all of that. And that's why I want to share with you today on this video. And I hope I was able to bring it to you effectively. And I hope I broke that mindset of going to failure on every single session and pushing yourself until you sore, you can't focus, you're tired throughout the day. I hope I gave you a different perspective and I broke that mindset, hopefully. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. You become the person you want to be by pushing through the times you want to quit.